Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you. I'm Neil Cavuto. The president on the stump and a Tea Party favorite, well, just stumped. Barack Obama pushing more big spending that he says won't add a dime to the deficit. Rand Paul's crunched the numbers and says it's about to explode the deficit. Says there's no way you could talk about more spending on things like infrastructure and green initiatives and climate change initiatives and preschool for all kids initiatives and so many other initiatives without initiating still bigger and a lot bigger deficits. Rand Paul here to say not only does the math not add up, nothing adds up. Senator, good to have you.
Nice to be with you, Neil.
What do you do now, Senator, as a Tea Party elected senator, and beyond that, just a very conservative, almost libertarian approach to this sort of thing? What do you do? What do you advocate Republicans do?
Well, I think we have to point out the truth. We can't let the president run around the country saying that he's cut the deficit by $2 trillion. Well, that's absurd. We've increased our debt by $6 trillion in his first term. And what does he say? Oh, because I didn't increase it $8 trillion, I've reduced it $2 trillion. Well, that's absurd. He's added $6 trillion to the debt, and that's just a fact. And he's probably going to add another 4 to 5, maybe $6 trillion more in his second term. And he's adding up all of these programs, and he wants to tell you, oh, they're not going to cost anything. Well, it's just amazing that nobody really wants to challenge him on this. He must have listed 50 different new programs, and they're not going to cost you anything.
Well, I think what he said, I'm going to add to the deficit, with immediately raised concerns to me, then how are they going to be paid for? And when he mentioned about closing tax loopholes and the like, and raising billions of dollars doing that, and then using Mitt Romney's name to say that's something that Mitt Romney wanted to do, methinks he was setting the stage for still more tax hikes to pay for what could be hundreds of billions of dollars worth of new spending. What do you think?
Well, I can tell you there's absolutely no mood among any Republicans in the Senate or the House for raising taxes again.
That includes loopholes and stuff like that.
Well, the thing is if we were going to have true tax reform, which means lowering rates and getting rid of loopholes, there's a lot of support for that. But nothing that he's talking about is lowering rates. He wants to increase rates. He wants to squeeze more money out of those who are working hard, and he just did that. He stuck it to the rich people at the end of the year. He got what he wanted, but he's not going to get any more tax revenue because it'll injure the economy. We think it will cause more unemployment, so we won't go along with more raises in taxes.
You know what worries me, though, Senator? I think that I know your views on this subject, but it seems like, in general, the administration and more of that powerful Democrats has said, we've given up the fight. We're done with the debt thing. We've cobbled together what we think will ultimately be $4 trillion in budget savings over the next 10 years. And even though they haven't, by the way, it's not a done deal yet. And that's it. We're wiping our hands of it. And that worries me because, A, it is over 10 years. B, the debt will still be larger than it is now in 10 years. And, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, there's a lot of wiggle room in even that. So what is going on? It's like this is the biggest signature issue of our time, and it's ignored.
Well, he says things out of both sides of his mouth. He says, well, he's ready to embrace things from Bowles-Simpson. But Bowles-Simpson talked about raising the age of eligibility for Social Security and for Medicare. But then in another part of his speech, he said absolutely he's not going to do anything to the retirement age. So I really don't know what he's talking about or if he really is intending to address the problems at all. If you do not address entitlements are growing so rapidly they will consume all the money in the budget within a decade. There will be no money for defense and no money for any discretionary programs.
No, you're right. I mean, the math is like a train wreck before it happens. I mean, you're quite right. But I guess what I want to ask you is the more immediate concern now are these sequestration cuts that were punted from the holidays. Now they kick in on March 1st, I guess. And obviously, the only way to avoid them is to come up either with other cuts or for Republicans to swallow revenue hikes. Given that, I would assume that Rand Paul would go ahead and let those sequestration cuts come.
Yeah, I think they've got to. And the thing that people need to know, Americans need to know that the sequestration, the $1 trillion, is a cut in the rate of increase in spending.
That is very crucial. I'm glad you made it. Crucial point.
Spending over the next decade will go up between $7 and $8 trillion, even with the sequester. No one is cutting the real amount of spending. That's why the deficit will continue to rise over the next decade, even with the sequester. So I think the sequester is a beginning. You have to do it, and then you have to do even much more than that if you're going to preserve us and keep us from really, I think, a debt crisis somewhere down the road.
But we always see our debt threatened to be downgraded by bringing it to the brink that the president mentioned last night, time and again, when you get up against a deadline and there's all this, hand-wringing and everything over the brink. And that is why we're downgraded, not the underlying problem. Do you agree with that?
Well, the debt's downgraded because we're not addressing they don't see us acting and addressing our deficit problem. But the other thing people need to realize is that if we don't fix these problems, what happens is we print up money to pay for the debt and you lose purchasing power. So the president claims that he cares about the poor and the middle class and senior citizens, but really he doesn't, because he's stealing their money. He's stealing their savings by devaluing their currency in paying for this massive debt. So it's a sleight of hand. And it really, the poor are struggling. People on Social Security don't get cost of living increases. They struggle to make their check buy their food each month because we have this massive deficit and they lose purchasing power.
But your view is, so I just want to go tight at time here, but your view is that this March 1st deadline comes up, you're confident or you suspect that Republicans would opt for letting that come, letting the cuts kick in, than even entertain tax hikes?
I think so. I think there's more resolve for letting the sequester happen now than there was 3 months ago.
All right, Senator, good seeing you again. Thank you very much.